Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Joanna Ho. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. After 3 years, Hongkongers can skip quarantine when they go to the mainland. The Housing Authority is expecting a smaller surplus, but says it has enough reserves. And there's a rush for new banknotes ahead of the Lunar New Year. There will be no more quarantine for anyone crossing the border to the mainland from Sunday. A maximum of 50,000 people can travel north through 3 checkpoints on land, a sharp rise from the current 3,500, Maisie Mock reports.
After a 3-year wait, quarantine-free travel across the border will resume from Sunday. People can go to the mainland through 7 checkpoints, but they must have a negative PCR test result within 48 hours before crossing. Each day, a maximum of 50,000 Hongkongers can travel north through 3 land checkpoints. Shenzhen Bay Port has a top limit of 10,000. The daily quota for Man Kam Tow control point is 5,000, and 35,000 can go through the Lok Ma Chau spur line. Hong Kong residents have to register on the government's online platform for the northbound trip, but do not have to do so when coming home. Mainlanders have to register to come to Hong Kong, but there's no quota for them to return home. No COVID test is required on reaching the mainland. The government estimates that another 10,000 people a day will fly to the mainland, take buses at the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, or catch ferries at the Hong Kong-Macau Ferry Terminal and the Hong Kong-China Ferry Terminal. People who buy tickets do not have to register on the government's platform, but private vehicles crossing the bridge must do so. High-speed rail services are expected to resume no later than the 15th of this month, after being suspended for 3 years because of COVID.
Even though we have a high number of cases recently, we have already apparently passed the top of this wave. That means the medical service, having been able to cope even when this wave has reached its climax, gives me the confidence that they will be able to continue to run the medical service, the public health service, efficiently and effectively.
Secretary for Health Lo Chong-mao suggested that people returning from the mainland should conduct rapid antigen tests for 6 consecutive days. He stressed that non-residents have to pay for vaccine jabs. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The Society for Community Organization, or SOCO, has welcomed the resumption of normal travel with the mainland, but it hopes the government can help those who lack technical knowledge.
We hope if they cannot, they don't know how to access to the internet. The government, for example, the Home Affairs Department in the district or Social Welfare Department or those NGOs, they can help to fill the paper, or they can access to the internet for them. They need to still have to do the test every day, every time. That we hope that will reduce the cost, and or even for those if they need to go in out frequency, they can. For example, they don't need to do every day, or can do only the quick test to replace the paid test.
From Sunday, Hong Kong residents traveling to Macau will no longer require negative COVID proof of any form. The same privilege applies to visitors from the mainland and Taiwan. Foreign passport holders will still need to conduct a PCR or rapid antigen test before arrival, but there will no longer be a quota. The gambling hub began dialing back restrictions last month, despite a resurgence in cases. Locally, the Housing Authority predicts a lower than expected surplus for the current accounting year and deficits in its rental housing operating account in the next 4 fiscal years. But it insists that current reserves are sufficient to cope with expenditure at the moment. The Housing Authority expects a surplus of $5.7 billion for the current fiscal year, about 40% lower than the amount predicted earlier. Chen Ka-lok, chairman of the HKIBC Finance Committee, says that's because of the lower-than-expected income from various sources, including investments and the sale of home ownership scheme flats.
This year, that we have really less of the HOS flats being assigned, and then so therefore that we have really received less proceeds coming from the HOS. The last couple of years, the Housing Authority have a lot of relief measures, right? Rent concession, and then to really to help out the tenants. So therefore, that there is really that effect on the surplus.
Chen said the HKIBC fiscal reserves are expected to go down from around $59 billion in April last year to $49.7 billion in March 2027 because of an increase in construction expenditure to meet housing supply targets. The cost of building each housing unit has increased from a year ago, up 17% for public housing and 18% for home ownership scheme flats. Although the HKIBC predicts deficits in the rental housing operating account to persist in the coming 4 fiscal years, Chen insists that the current reserves are sufficient and it's not necessary to ask the government for more funding at this stage. He dismissed concerns that rents might be raised, saying the HKIBC assesses the affordability of tenants based on their income instead of the authority's financial situation. The HKIBC's income is mainly from the rental of public housing and commercial properties, the sale of surplus home ownership scheme flats, and investments. Long queues were seen outside the major banks this morning as people waited to exchange old notes for new ones. With the lifting of most COVID curbs, many said they will be giving out more LIC packets this Lunar New Year. Joanna Ho reports.
People waited patiently this morning outside branches of the 3 note-issuing banks, Standard Chartered, Bank of China, and HSBC. That's because the banks were issuing brand new and good-as-new notes for the Lunar New Year. The banks opened 1 hour earlier at 8 a.m. and will do so until Saturday. The Year of the Rabbit, which begins on the 22nd of this month, is the first Lunar New Year in 3 years with most COVID curbs scrapped. Most people are taking advantage with more visits to friends and families and handing out LIC packets containing crisp banknotes. I usually get $3,000 worth of new banknotes, but this year I got $2,000 more, this woman said, adding that she will be giving out more red packets to compensate for previous years. This man was at the bank at 6:30 a.m. Despite the economic slump, he will be distributing more red packets this year because he has not been able to greet his friends and families for so long. HSBC said more new bills were prepared this time because of overwhelming demand. Those wishing to avoid queues can pre-order online, but the limit is capped at $3,000. Standard Chartered said the number of customers choosing to reserve new banknotes online rose by 30% this year. HSBC and Standard Chartered are encouraging people to distribute electronic red packets. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
Overseas, a small town in the U.S. state of Utah is in shock after 8 members of a family, including 5 children, were found dead with gunshot wounds.
We all know this family. Many of us have served with them in church, in community, and have gone to school with these individuals. And so this community at this time is hurting. They're feeling loss. They're feeling pain.
Police in the town of Enoch found the bodies when they called at the victim's home. Officers were alerted after family members were not seen for some time. The deceased were well known in the town of 8,000. Police are trying to find out who pulled the trigger and why. Catholic Church leaders and pilgrims gathered at the Vatican today for the funeral of former Pope Benedict. The coffin of the only pontiff to resign in 600 years was carried from St. Peter's Basilica to St. Peter's Square for the funeral mass. Pope Francis conducted the service, becoming the first pontiff to preside at the funeral of his predecessor. Benedict died last Saturday at the age of 95 after a long illness. A Hong Kong court allowed retired Cardinal Joseph San, who is being investigated under the national security law, to attend the funeral. The Hong Kong stock market extended its New Year rally as investors welcomed the resumption of quarantine-free cross-border travel. The Hang Seng Index gained 1.3% to reach a 6-month high. Tech shares continued to advance, with market heavyweight Alibaba jumping 3.2%. Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed up 259 points. To the top 10 active stocks, Tencent was up $4.93, Meituan up $9.50. AIA down $2.25, JD.com up $6.40. To the forex trading against the Hong Kong dollar, euros at 8.28, pounds at 9.38, and Australian dollar at 5.33. Over to the UK market, FTSE 100 is up 28 points. The world's largest technology trade fair kicks off in Las Vegas, with exhibitors returning in the flesh after COVID turned them away for the past 2 years. Raymond Yang reports.
While the Consumer Electronics Show returns to its former glory for the first time in 3 years, the organizer decided to turn away some exhibitors.
We are not allowing Russian exhibitors at this show because of the Ukraine situation. We've advised them to shift to another country, and I believe a couple have done that.
Traditionally, CES has long been a place for companies to showcase novel inventions and strange gadgets. That includes a microphone which muffles the voice of users to avoid disturbing neighbors at night.
This is a voice dampener microphone. It's very good, the silencing function. So, can you hear?
And augmented reality glasses, which listen to conversations and provide real-time translations.
So you can have a face-to-face conversation with me, and even if we don't speak the same language, it automatically translates with subtitles.
But perhaps the most groundbreaking news of all is Sony's attempt to enter the automobile industry. The Japanese electronics giant has unveiled a prototype car, which it jointly developed with Honda. Mass production could begin in 2025. The 4-day trade show is expected to draw more than 100,000 visitors. Raymond Yang, HKIBC.
On to the weather now. Tomorrow will be fine and dry with sunny periods. Temperatures will range between 17 and 22 degrees, cooler at the weekend. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Thursday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Joanna Ho. Good night.